you don't want me, sir, I'll keep walking, but I can cook." Those words, spoken through frozen tears by a broken woman clutching nothing but an iron skillet, would change everything at Stonefield Ranch. Evelyn Hart had lost it all: home, dignity, future, to her dead husband's lies. Now she stood before Lucas Hale, the rancher who'd buried 3 cooks in as many months, offering the only thing she had left: her hands and her fire. What happened next shocked an entire frontier town. This is that story. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far Evelyn's journey reaches. And hit that like button if you believe second chances are real. Now, let's begin. The sun had no mercy that morning. Evelyn Hart learned this truth the hard way, face down in the dirt on the outskirts of a town whose name she'd already forgotten. Her fingers clawed at the packed earth, searching for purchase, for dignity, for anything solid in a world that had turned to smoke and ash beneath her feet. She was 34 years old. She owned 3 copper pennies, 1 iron skillet, and the tattered remains of a life that had been systematically dismantled by a dead man's secrets. The irony wasn't lost on her. Thomas Hart had died 3 months ago, lauded as a respectable businessman, mourned by neighbors who'd attended his funeral with solemn faces and casseroles. They'd stopped bringing food by the 2nd week. They'd stopped visiting entirely by the 3rd, once the creditors started circling like vultures over carrion. "Mrs. Hart," the banker's voice had been smooth as river stones, just as cold. "I'm afraid your husband's debts exceed the value of your property by a substantial margin. The house will be seized. We'll auction the contents to recover what we can." She'd stood in her own parlor, Thomas's parlor, she'd learned, never really hers, and watched strangers catalog her life. The oak dining table her grandmother had brought across the plains in a wagon. The china painted with tiny blue flowers. The wedding dress she'd kept wrapped in muslin, thinking maybe someday a daughter. "This too, ma'am." The auction man hadn't even looked at her as he'd marked the trunk. Everything. They'd taken everything. The pennies in her pocket now had been a mercy from Thomas's sister, pressed into her palm with whispered apologies and eyes that wouldn't quite meet hers. "I'd help more if I could, Evelyn, truly, but Harold says we can't afford to be associated with, well, you understand." She'd understood perfectly. Scandal was contagious. Debt was a disease. And she'd been quarantined from polite society with brutal efficiency. The skillet she'd saved by the simple expedient of not being home when they came for the last of it. She'd been walking by then, 1 foot in front of the other, moving because stopping meant thinking and thinking meant breaking, and she couldn't afford to break. Not yet. Not until she'd found somewhere, anywhere, that would take her in. 4 towns. She'd tried 4 towns in as many weeks. The first had been Millbrook, where she'd knocked on the door of the boarding house with her last scrap of hope. "I can clean," she'd said. "Cook, mend, anything you need." The proprietress had looked her up and down with eyes that calculated worth down to the penny. "Can you pay?" "Not yet, but if you'd give me work." The door had closed before she'd finished the sentence. The second town, she'd tried the general store. The owner had been kinder, almost apologetic. "I wish I could help, ma'am, but my wife handles the hiring, and she's particular about a woman's circumstances. A widow with debts, you understand. People talk." The third town had been worse. She'd been run off by the sheriff himself, a thick-necked man with tobacco-stained teeth who'd looked at her worn dress and dirty face and seen something other than desperation. "We don't need your kind here," he'd said, hand resting on his gun. "Keep moving." She'd kept moving, and now the 4th town, she thought it might be called Redemption, though that seemed too cruel to be real, had offered her the same welcome as all the others. No work, no room, no hope. Evelyn pushed herself up from the dirt, tasting dust and defeat. Her hands trembled. When had she last eaten? Yesterday morning, maybe. A half portion of hardtack she'd bought 2 towns back, rationing it like gold because 3 copper pennies didn't stretch far, and the road between settlements was long and empty. The skillet bumped against her leg as she stood, heavy and reassuring. Cast iron, black with age and use, seasoned by generations of Hart women who'd probably never imagined their heirloom would end up as a homeless widow's only possession. Her great-grandmother had cooked over open fires during the wagon journey west. Her grandmother had fed a family of 8 through 2 hard winters. Her mother had taught Evelyn to coax flavor from nothing, to stretch beans and flour into meals that filled bellies and warmed hearts. Cooking's not just food, her mother had said, stirring a pot that smelled like home and safety. It's love made visible. It's how we take care of people when words aren't enough. Evelyn looked at the skillet now, really looked at it. The handle worn smooth from countless hands, the surface dark and gleaming with layers of fat and fire. It had survived the wagon trail, survived the war, survived the lean years and the fat ones. It had survived. Maybe she could too. 3 pennies, 1 skillet. And somewhere in this sun-scorched country, there had to be someone who needed what she could offer. She started walking again. The road stretched ahead, wavering in the heat like a promise that couldn't quite hold its shape. Evelyn's boots, cracked leather that pinched her toes, raised small clouds of dust with each step. The sun climbed higher. Her shadow shrank beneath her feet. The canteen at her hip had been empty since yesterday afternoon. By midday, she'd left the last buildings of redemption behind. Nothing ahead but scrub grass and rocky soil and the occasional twisted tree that looked as desperate as she felt. Her vision started playing tricks, showing her water where there was none, shade that disappeared when she reached for it. She should stop, find shelter, wait for the worst heat to pass. But stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant confronting the howling emptiness inside her chest where her life used to be, and she couldn't. Not yet. So she walked. The sun beat down. Her lips cracked. Her legs moved on instinct, disconnected from conscious thought. 1 foot, then the other. Again. Again. She almost missed the smoke. It was thin, barely visible against the pale sky, rising from somewhere off the main road. Evelyn stopped, swaying slightly, squinting toward the source. Not a wildfire. Too controlled. Someone's camp, maybe. Someone with water. Someone who might share. She left the road, stumbling through the scrub toward that thin promise of smoke. Her heart hammered against her ribs, whether from exertion or hope she couldn't say. The skillet banged against her thigh with each unsteady step. The camp appeared suddenly, tucked into a hollow between 2 rocky rises. A small fire, burning clean and contained. A bedroll, neatly arranged. A horse, grazing peacefully in what passed for shade. And a man. He was old, 70 if he was a day, with skin tanned to leather and white hair that stuck out from under a battered hat. He sat cross-legged by the fire, nursing a tin cup of what smelled like coffee. Real coffee. The scent hit Evelyn like a physical force, made her stomach cramp with sudden, desperate hunger. The man looked up as she approached, his eyes sharp despite his age. He didn't reach for the rifle propped against his saddle, but she saw him note its location, calculating, careful. "Ma'am." His voice was rough as gravel, but not unkind. "You look about 3 steps from dead." Evelyn tried to speak, found her throat too dry. She swallowed, tried again. "Water?" He studied her for a long moment. Then he reached behind him, producing a canteen. "Slow," he warned as he tossed it to her. "You drink too fast in your state, you'll just bring it back up." She caught the canteen with shaking hands, forced herself to take small sips even though every cell in her body screamed to gulp. The water was warm, tasted of metal and minerals, and was the most beautiful thing she'd ever experienced. 3 sips. 4. She made herself stop, cap the canteen, return it. "Thank you. Sit before you fall." He gestured to a spot across the fire. "You eaten today?" "I'm fine." That wasn't the question. He was already moving, pulling items from his pack. "Got some jerky here, bit of bread, nothing fancy." Evelyn's pride wrestled briefly with her hunger. Hunger won. She sank down across from him, accepted the food he offered, and ate slowly, carefully, making each bite last. The jerky was tough but flavorful. The bread was dense and satisfying. She felt strength seeping back into her limbs, thought creeping back into her brain. The man watched her eat, sipping his coffee, saying nothing. When she'd finished, he spoke. "Got a name?" "Evelyn Hart." "Jonah Reed." He tilted his head slightly, still studying her. "And what brings Evelyn Hart to the middle of nowhere with nothing but a skillet and a death wish?" She should have been offended. should have defended herself, made excuses, constructed some story that sounded less pathetic than the truth. But she was too tired for lies, and this stranger had fed her when she'd needed it most. He'd earned honesty. "My husband died," she said quietly. "Left debts I didn't know about. They took everything. I've been trying to find work, but—" She gestured at herself, dirty, desperate, clearly at the end of her rope. "No one wants to take a chance on a woman in my circumstances." Husband a gambler? Among other things. The bitterness surprised her. She'd thought she was past anger, buried it somewhere beneath the exhaustion and fear. Apparently not. He was good at keeping secrets, better at losing money. Jonah nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he'd already suspected. "Where you headed?" "Anywhere that'll have me." She met his eyes. "I can work. I'm not afraid of hard labor. I can cook, clean, mend, tend animals if needed. I just need someone to give me a chance." "Can you really cook?" His tone sharpened slightly. "Not just boil water and burn toast. Real cooking." "Yes." No hesitation. "I learned from my mother. She learned from hers. I can make something good from almost nothing. I can stretch supplies, plan for seasons, cook for 2 people or 20. I can preserve, can, smoke meat. Whatever's needed." "Prove it." Evelyn blinked. "Sir?" Jonah gestured at the fire. "I got beans. Some salt pork. Little bit of onion and some spices. You got your skillet. Show me what you can do." It was a test. They both knew it. Evelyn didn't know what passing might mean, but she knew she couldn't afford to fail. She stood, skillet in hand, and surveyed his supplies with a practiced eye. Not much to work with, but she'd had less. The beans were dried but good quality. The salt pork would add fat and flavor. The onion was half withered but still firm enough. As for spices, she found black pepper, some dried sage, and what looked like wild garlic. "May I use your knife?" He handed it over without comment. Evelyn worked with steady, efficient movements born of years of practice. She diced the salt pork small, rendered the fat in the bottom of the skillet, added the withered onion chopped fine. The smell rose up, savory and promising. She crushed the wild garlic with the flat of the blade, added it to the pan, let the aromatics bloom in the hot fat. Then the beans, some water from Jonah's supply. The sage crumbled between her palms. She adjusted the skillet's position over the fire, finding the perfect heat, and settled into wait, stirring occasionally, adding water as needed, tasting and adjusting. 40 minutes later, she served Jonah Reed a plate of beans that looked simple but tasted like comfort, like home, like someone gave a damn whether you lived or died. He ate in silence, methodically working through the entire portion. When he finished, he set down his plate and looked at her with those sharp old eyes. "You got real talent, Mrs. Hart. Thank you. Wasting away on the road's a crime against good cooking." He poured himself more coffee, offered her some. She accepted gratefully. "You know anything about ranching?" "Not much," she admitted. "I grew up in town, but I learned fast." "Don't need you to learn ranching, need you to cook." He leaned back, considering. "There's a place about 15 miles northeast of here, Stonefield Ranch. Biggest cattle operation in 3 counties, run by a man named Lucas Hale. You heard of him?" Evelyn shook her head. "Hale's complicated. Lost his wife some years back. Fire. Same fire that damn near killed him, too. You'll see the scars if you meet him. Made him hard. Made him mean, some say, though I think it's more grief than cruelty. He runs that ranch like a military operation. Demands perfection. Accepts nothing less. Doesn't suffer fools and doesn't tolerate failure." "Sounds like a terrible place to work." "For most people, yeah." Jonah smiled slightly. "But here's the thing. Hale burns through cooks like kindling. Had 3 just this year. One lasted 2 weeks before she ran off crying. One made it a month before Hale fired him for oversalting the beef. The last one quit after 4 days, said she'd rather starve than work for the devil himself." "And you think he'd hire me?" Evelyn couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. "A desperate widow with nothing to her name?" "I think desperation might be exactly what you need." Jonah set down his cup, leveled that sharp gaze at her. "Those other cooks, they had options. They could quit, go elsewhere, find easier work. You can't. You'll fight for that job because you have to. You'll put up with Hale's moods and his demands because the alternative is dying on the road. And that means you might actually last long enough to prove yourself. It was brutal honesty. It was also completely accurate. Does he pay fair? More than fair. Room and board, plus wages that'd let you save if you're careful. You work there a year, you could clear your husband's debts and have something left over to start fresh. A year. 12 months of cooking for a mean, scarred rancher who drove away everyone who worked for him. It sounded like a special kind of torment. It also sounded like hope. How do I find this place? Jonah gave her detailed directions, landmarks to watch for, turns to take, how to know when she'd crossed onto Hale's land. Follow the fence line north till you see the main house. Big stone building, can't miss it. Ask for work directly. Don't go through the foreman or the hands. Hale respects people who face him straight on. And if he says no, then you'll have walked 15 miles for nothing. Jonah shrugged. But you were walking anyway, weren't you? Might as well walk toward something instead of just away. Evelyn stood, straightened her dress as best she could, tried to smooth her hair. Hopeless, but she made the attempt anyway. Thank you, Mr. Reed, for the food, the water, the information. I don't know how to repay you. Don't need repayment, just need you to keep that cooking talent alive. He stood too, moved to his horse, returned with a small cloth bundle. Take this, enough food to get you there, plus a little extra. And Mrs. Hart? She paused, looking back at him. When you meet Lucas Hale, don't apologize for yourself. Don't beg. Just tell him what you can do and let your work speak. That man's seen enough weakness in his life. He'll respect strength, even if it comes wrapped in desperation. I'll remember. She walked northeast as the sun climbed toward its peak, following Jonah Reed's directions with a map written in hope and hunger. The landscape shifted gradually, scrub giving way to grassland, empty plains breaking into rolling hills. Fences appeared, sturdy and well-maintained, marking the boundaries of something substantial. Stonefield Ranch. The name appeared on a weathered wooden sign burned deep into the wood. Evelyn stopped, one hand on the fence post, looking at those letters. This was it, the place that could save her or break her. Probably both. She kept walking. The fence line stretched on, seemingly endless. Her feet ached, the sun burned. But there was water in her canteen now, food in her pocket, and something more precious than either, purpose. A destination. A chance. 2 hours later, she saw the house. Jonah had been right. You couldn't miss it. 3 stories of gray stone, solid as a fortress, commanding the landscape like it had grown there naturally. Outbuildings clustered around it, barn, bunkhouse, stable, smokehouse, others she couldn't identify. Corrals held dozens of horses. In the distance, cattle dotted the hillsides, too many to count. This wasn't just a ranch. It was an empire. And somewhere inside that stone fortress was Lucas Hale, the man who might give her a chance or send her back to the road to die. Evelyn approached the main house with her spine straight and her chin up, channeling a confidence she absolutely did not feel. Ranch hands paused in their work to watch her pass, a strange woman, travel-worn and clearly desperate, walking toward the boss's house like she had every right to be there. One of them, a young man with sun-bleached hair, stepped into her path. "Ma'am, can I help you with something?" "I'm here to see Mr. Hale." "The boss don't usually see people without—" "Then he can tell me that himself." She stepped around him, kept walking. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she didn't let it show. Strength, even wrapped in desperation. That's what Jonah had said. That's what she'd give. The front door of the house was massive, dark wood reinforced with iron. Evelyn raised her hand and knocked, 3 sharp raps that echoed with more authority than she felt. Silence. She knocked again. The door opened. The man standing there was tall, probably 6'2", with broad shoulders and a presence that filled the doorway like a physical force. He might have been handsome once. Strong features, dark hair just starting to gray at the temples, eyes the color of storm clouds, but scars carved across the left side of his face and neck, old burns that had healed rough and angry, pulling at the corner of his mouth in a permanent, almost snarl. His left hand gripping the doorframe was scarred too, the skin twisted and shiny. This was Lucas Hale. Had to be. He looked at her with those storm cloud eyes, expression unreadable, Whatever you're selling, I'm not buying. I'm not selling anything. Evelyn's voice came out steadier than she'd expected. I'm here about the cook position. There is no cook position. You've had 3 cooks quit or get fired in the last year. That means there's a position, whether you're actively looking to fill it or not. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or annoyance, hard to tell. And you think you're qualified? I know I am. Based on what? Your sunny disposition? His tone was knife-edged sarcasm. Based on the fact that I can cook for 20 men, stretch supplies through a hard season, and I don't quit when things get difficult. She met his gaze, held it. I need this job, Mr. Hale. I won't pretend otherwise. But you need a cook who will actually stay, and I'm too desperate to leave. That makes us both lucky. Desperate makes people unreliable. Desperate makes people grateful. There's a difference. He studied her for a long moment, and she felt the weight of that gaze like a physical thing. He was cataloging her, the worn dress, the dusty boots, the skillet strapped to her pack, reading her history in her desperation. You run from something, Mrs. Hart. And I'm not running from anything. I'm running toward a chance to survive. Same thing, usually. Not even close. Another long silence. Then Lucas Hale stepped back from the door. You get 1 week, room in the back of the house, meals with the hands. You cook breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 23 men, including yourself. You handle supplies, planning, clean up. You screw up, you're gone. You slack off, you're gone. You cause trouble with my men, you're gone immediately. Understood? It wasn't an offer, it was a challenge. Evelyn straightened her spine. Understood. When do I start? Now. Dinner's in 3 hours. Kitchen's through there. He pointed down a hallway. Don't burn down my house. I'll do my best. He'd already turned away, dismissing her. And Mrs. Hart? I don't care what brought you here or how desperate you are. You can cook or you can't. The work will speak for itself. Don't waste my time with excuses. I won't. She walked down the hallway he'd indicated, leaving Lucas Hale behind, and found herself in the largest kitchen she'd ever seen. Commercial-sized stove, enough counter space for 3 cooks, shelves stocked with supplies, a root cellar visible through an open door. It was beautiful. It was intimidating. It was hers, at least for the next week. Evelyn set her skillet down on the counter, rolled up her sleeves, and got to work. She started with inventory, checking what was available, what was running low, mentally cataloging the possibilities. Good quality beef, as expected on a cattle ranch. Plenty of beans, flour, salt, fresh vegetables in the root cellar, not much variety but well maintained, dried herbs, basic spices, lard for cooking, coffee, thank the stars, in generous supply. Enough to work with. More than enough. 23 men for dinner. She'd cooked for more, back when Thomas had been alive, and she'd helped her neighbor with church suppers. The difference was those had been friendly crowds, appreciative and kind. This would be Lucas Hale and his ranch hands, men who'd watched 3 cooks before her fail. They'd be skeptical, critical, looking for reasons to dismiss her. She'd have to be perfect. Evelyn built the menu in her head. Beef stew, rich and hearty, with root vegetables and fresh herbs. Biscuits, light and flaky, the kind that could soak up the gravy. Dried apple pie, if time allowed. Coffee strong enough to strip paint. She moved through the kitchen with growing confidence, finding her rhythm. The stove responded to her adjustments. The knives were sharp, well maintained. Someone had set up this kitchen to function, even if they'd failed to find anyone who could use it properly. 2 hours later, the house began to fill with smells that made mouths water. Beef and onions, bread baking, cinnamon and sugar. The scents drifted through hallways and out windows, announcing her presence more effectively than any introduction could have. Men started appearing in doorways, drawn by their noses. Young ones, old ones, every type in between. They looked at her with curiosity, skepticism, hope. The same expression she'd been seeing for weeks, just in a different context. Ma'am? One of them, older, probably the foreman. Mr. Hale says dinner's at 6. It will be. Evelyn didn't look up from her biscuits, shaping them with quick, efficient movements. Set the table for 23. Make sure there's coffee cups for everyone. Yes, ma'am. They moved to obey, which surprised her. Apparently her confidence, real or performed, carried weight here. Or maybe they were just that hungry for a decent meal. At exactly 6 o'clock, she rang the dinner bell. The dining hall filled quickly, long tables, bench seating, the kind of setup designed for efficiency over comfort. The men filed in, taking their places with practiced ease. Lucas Hale sat at the head of the main table, his scarred face impassive, watching. Evelyn served the stew in large bowls, placed baskets of biscuits every few feet, poured coffee with steady hands. Then she took her own seat at the far end, away from Hale, and waited. The first man to taste the stew was young, maybe 20, with earnest eyes and sunburned cheeks. He spooned up a mouthful, chewed slowly, and his entire face transformed. Surprise, then pleasure, then something close to joy. Holy! He caught himself, glanced at her. Sorry, ma'am. This is incredible. Others tried it. The response spread like wildfire. Murmurs of appreciation, requests for seconds, biscuits disappearing so fast she had to bring out another batch. The dried apple pie vanished before she could cut herself a slice. Through it all, Lucas Hale ate in silence. He didn't compliment the food, didn't criticize it either. Just ate steadily, methodically, his expression revealing nothing. When the meal ended, the men cleared their plates and filed out, several of them pausing to nod their thanks to her. The foreman, she'd learned his name was Samuel Briggs, stopped on his way out. Best meal we've had in 6 months, Mrs. Hart. Thank you. Just doing my job, Mr. Briggs. If you can keep this up for a week, the boss would be a fool not to hire you permanent. Then I guess I'll keep it up. He smiled, a brief flash of warmth, and left. The dining hall emptied. Evelyn began cleaning up, scraping plates, organizing dishes. She was elbow deep in wash water when she realized she wasn't alone. Lucas Hale stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching her. You need something, Mr. Hale? The men liked the food. They were hungry, low bar to clear. Don't sell yourself short. He moved into the room, his steps deliberate. That was good cooking, better than good. Thank you. One meal doesn't make a week. His tone was flat, neither encouraging nor dismissive. Tomorrow's breakfast is at 5:30. The men start work at 6. They need food that'll stick with them through a hard morning. Can you do that? Yes. Then we'll see. He turned to leave, paused. Your room is ready. Back hallway, last door on the right. You need anything, tell Briggs. I will. He left without another word. Evelyn finished the dishes, dried her hands, and went to find her room. It was small, just a bed, a dresser, a single window, but it was clean and private and hers. The first private space she'd had since losing her home 3 months ago. She sat on the bed, felt it give slightly under her weight, and allowed herself a single moment of victory. She'd done it. She'd found work. She had a roof over her head, food to eat, a chance to prove herself. 1 week, 7 days to convince Lucas Hale she was worth keeping. Evelyn unpacked her few possessions, a change of clothes, the skillet, the 3 copper pennies she still carried like talismans, and lay down in her new bed. Through the window, she could see the evening sky turning purple and gold, stars beginning to emerge. For the first time in months, she fell asleep without tears. She woke at 4:30, gave herself 30 minutes to dress and prepare, and was in the kitchen by 5. The house was silent except for the settling sounds of old stone and wood. Evelyn lit the stove, set water to boil for coffee, and began assembling breakfast. Eggs, scrambled in batches to keep them hot. Thick-cut bacon, fried crisp. Fried potatoes with onions. Fresh biscuits. She'd made the dough last night, let it rest in the cold cellar. Gravy, rich with bacon fat and black pepper. Oatmeal for those who wanted it, with brown sugar and dried fruit. The smells began their work again, pulling men from sleep, drawing them toward the kitchen like magic. By 5:30, they were gathering. By 5:40, everyone was seated. Lucas Hale appeared exactly on time, took a seat, and began eating without comment. The pattern established itself over the following days. Evelyn cooked. The men ate. Lucas watched in silence, his expression unreadable behind those scars. She never knew if she was succeeding or failing, never got more than a nod of acknowledgement, but the men's reactions told her enough. They were eating better than they had in months, maybe years. Energy returned to their steps. Complaints about the food stopped entirely. On the third day, she overheard two hands talking outside the kitchen window. Think Hale will keep her? He'd be insane not to. You taste those biscuits this morning? Yeah, light as air. My ma used to make them like that. Your ma probably used 3 times the butter. Mrs. Hart's making them good on a ranch budget. That's skill. On the 5th day, Lucas Hale spoke to her directly for only the 2nd time since she'd arrived. The men are working harder. Evelyn looked up from the bread she was kneading. Sir? Their productivity's up. Briggs says they're getting more done in less time. He stood in the kitchen doorway, same position as before. Good food improves morale, improves everything, really. That's what my mother used to say. Your mother was right. He paused, and something in his expression shifted. A crack in the armor, maybe, or just the light changing. You're doing well here, Mrs. Hart. Thank you. But the week's not over. Don't celebrate yet. He left her alone with the bread and the strange, warm feeling that maybe, just maybe, she was building something here that could last. The week ended on a Sunday. Evelyn had served 21 meals, cleaned the kitchen 21 times, proven herself in the most fundamental way possible. She'd shown up. She'd worked. She'd produced results. Lucas Hale found her in the kitchen after Sunday dinner, dishes washed and put away, everything ready for Monday morning. Pack your things tonight, he said. Her heart stopped. After everything, after proving herself, he was sending her away. Mr. Hale, if I did something wrong, you're moving to the main room upstairs. The room you're in now is too small, no proper heat for winter. You'll need better quarters if you're staying permanent. The world righted itself. Staying permanent? You've earned it. Standard wages, room and board, Sundays off if you want them, though you'll still need to arrange meals. You can save your money or spend it. I don't care which. Just keep cooking like you have been. He looked at her directly, and for the first time she saw something other than harsh assessment in his eyes. You've done good work here, Mrs. Hart. Better than I expected. Thank you, Mr. Hale. Her voice came out steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. I won't let you down. See that you don't. He started to leave, then paused. And Mrs. Hart, whatever brought you here, whatever you're running from or toward, it doesn't matter to me. The past is dead. What matters is what you do with the time ahead. Remember that. I will. That night, in her small room, soon to be replaced by something better, Evelyn counted the 3 copper pennies that had brought her this far. 3 pennies and an iron skillet. That's what she'd had when she'd collapsed on the road, certain she'd reached the end. But it hadn't been the end. It had been the beginning. She'd found work, found purpose, found a place where her skills mattered more than her circumstances. And tomorrow, she'd wake up and do it all again. Because this time, she wasn't just surviving, she was building a life. The first month passed like water through cupped hands, present and sustaining, but moving too quickly to fully grasp. Evelyn settled into the rhythm of Stonefield Ranch with the careful precision of someone who knew opportunity was fragile and second chances rare. She woke before dawn, slept after dark, and filled the hours between with work that spoke louder than any words she could offer. The new room Lucas had given her was 3 times the size of the first, with a proper window that caught the morning light and a small stove that would keep her warm when winter came. She kept it sparse, her few belongings arranged with military neatness, the iron skillet displayed on the dresser like a trophy, because that's what it was. A reminder of how far she'd come on almost nothing. The ranch hands had stopped watching her with suspicion and started watching her with something closer to reverence. Samuel Briggs, the foreman, had taken to consulting her about supply orders, trusting her judgment on quantities and quality. The younger men asked her advice on everything from mending torn shirts to writing letters home. She'd become more than the cook. She'd become part of the fabric of the place. Lucas Hale remained an enigma. He ate every meal she prepared, arrived exactly on time, left without unnecessary conversation. Sometimes she'd catch him watching her with those storm cloud eyes, his expression unreadable behind the scars that carved his face into permanent severity. He never complained about the food, never complimented it either, except for that one time after her first week. His approval came in silence and continued employment, which Evelyn had learned to accept as the highest praise he offered anyone. But there were moments, brief, barely noticeable, when she saw something else. The way he'd paused when she'd burned her hand on a pot handle, stepping forward as if to help before catching himself. The morning he'd found her trying to move a 50-pound sack of flour and had simply picked it up and carried it where she needed without a word. The evening she'd overheard him tell Briggs that the men's improved morale was entirely due to Mrs. Hart's efforts, in a tone that suggested respect, maybe even gratitude. He was watching her. Not with suspicion, but with something more complex. Like he was waiting to see if she'd prove to be real or just another disappointment in a long line of them. Evelyn intended to prove very real indeed. On a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks into her employment, she was in the root cellar taking inventory when she heard raised voices from the kitchen above. Male voices, angry, getting louder. She climbed the stairs quickly and found 2 ranch hands, Jack Sutton and Tom Porter, standing nose to nose, fists clenched, faces red. "I'm telling you, you cheated." Tom's voice was raw with fury. "Nobody's luck runs that good without help." "You calling me a liar?" Jack shoved him hard. "Say it plain if you're going to say it." "Hey!" Evelyn stepped between them, which was either brave or stupid, probably both. "Whatever this is about, it doesn't happen in my kitchen. You want to fight, take it outside." "He cheated at cards last night," Tom spat, trying to step around her. "Took 3 weeks of my wages on hands he couldn't have won fair." "I won fair, and you're just a sore loser." "Enough." The word cracked through the air like a whip. Lucas Hale stood in the doorway, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. His presence filled the space with an authority that needed no volume, no threats. He just looked at the 2 men with those scarred features set in stone, and they both stepped back like scalded dogs. "Mr. Hale, I can explain," Jack started. "I don't care." Lucas's voice was flat, final. "You settle your disputes off the ranch, off my time, and away from Mrs. Hart's kitchen. She's got work to do and you're preventing it. That clear?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Tom, you're on fence repair today, north pasture. Jack, you're mucking stables. Both of you move before I find harder jobs." They moved, scrambling past him like their boots were on fire. When they were gone, Lucas turned to Evelyn, and his expression softened fractionally, barely noticeable unless you were learning to read him, which she was. "You all right?" "Fine. They're just young and stupid. Young and stupid can still be dangerous." He stepped into the kitchen, his gaze sweeping the space as if checking for damage. "You shouldn't have gotten between them." "Probably not, but nobody fights in my kitchen." Something that might have been approval flickered in his eyes. "Your kitchen? You gave it to me. I'm taking possession." She turned back to her work, began chopping onions with quick, precise strokes. Besides, they weren't really going to fight. Too much noise, not enough action. Men who actually want to hit each other don't waste time yelling first. That's surprisingly insightful. "I was married. I learned to tell the difference between real anger and performance." Lucas was quiet for a moment, watching her work. Then he said, "Your husband, the one who left you the debts, he hit you?" The question was direct, almost brutal in its plainness. Evelyn considered lying, decided against it. "No, Thomas wasn't violent, just careless with money and truth. Sometimes that's worse." "Yeah." Something in his voice suggested he understood more than she'd said. "Sometimes it is." He left her alone after that, but the conversation lingered in Evelyn's mind all day. It was the most personal exchange they'd had, the first time he'd asked her anything about her past. She wondered what it meant, if it meant anything at all, then forced herself to stop wondering and focus on dinner. The incident with Jack and Tom had an unexpected consequence. Word spread that Mrs. Hart had stepped between 2 fighting men without flinching, that the boss himself had backed her up, that her kitchen was now officially off limits for ranch disputes. It solidified her position in a way no amount of good cooking could have. The men didn't just respect her skills anymore, they respected her. "You're tougher than you look," Samuel Briggs told her a few days later, helping her carry supplies from the wagon. "Most women would have run screaming or fainted dead away." "Most women haven't had to learn toughness the way I did." Evelyn set down a crate of potatoes, wiped her hands on her apron. "You don't survive what I survived by being fragile." "Fair point." He paused, then added carefully, "The boss notices, you know, how hard you work, how you handle yourself. He doesn't say much, but he notices everything." "I've gathered that." Just thought you should know. Lucas Hale's not an easy man, but he's fair. You keep proving yourself. He'll stand by you. Already has, really. Way he backed you up with Jack and Tom. Evelyn thought about that conversation later, turning it over in her mind like a puzzle with missing pieces. What did it mean that Lucas noticed? What did it mean that he'd defended her territory, established her authority in front of the men? Was it just good management, keeping his ranch running smoothly? Or was it something more? She told herself it didn't matter. She was here to work, to earn her wages, to build enough savings to clear her debts, and maybe, someday, start fresh somewhere. Lucas Hale's motivations were his own business. But she noticed things too. The way he always took slightly smaller portions than the other men, leaving more for everyone else. The morning she'd seen him slip extra wages to a young hand whose mother was sick, with strict instructions not to mention it. The evening he'd spent 2 hours fixing a broken wheel on the supply wagon himself rather than pulling a man off other work. He was hard, yes, demanding, but not cruel, not selfish. Just someone who'd learned to protect himself with walls so high even he might have forgotten how to climb back down. Autumn deepened into early winter. The work changed with the seasons, more preserving, more planning for lean months ahead, more hearty meals to keep the men fueled against the cold. Evelyn thrived in the challenge. She canned vegetables, smoked meats, baked bread that filled the house with warmth and made the men's faces light up like children on Christmas morning. Her savings grew. Each week, Samuel handed her wages in a small envelope, and each week she tucked most of it away in a tin box under her bed. The numbers added up slowly but steadily. In 6 months, maybe 8, she'd have enough to pay off Thomas's remaining creditors and be truly free. The thought kept her going through the hardest days, the coldest mornings, the moments when exhaustion threatened to drag her under. On a particularly bitter evening in November, Evelyn was preparing supper when Lucas appeared in the kitchen doorway. This was unusual. He typically avoided the kitchen except for meals, giving her space to work undisturbed. "Mrs. Hart? A word?" She set down her knife, wiped her hands. "Of course." He stepped inside and she noticed he was holding a ledger book, the kind he used for ranch accounts. "I've been reviewing the household expenses. Your management of the food budget is remarkable. You're spending 30% less than my previous cooks while producing significantly better results. I learned to stretch money during some lean years, old habits, valuable habits." He set the ledger on the counter, opened it to a marked page. "I'm increasing your wages, 15%, effective immediately. You've more than earned it." Evelyn stared at the numbers he was showing her, her mind calculating rapidly. 15% meant she could clear her debts in 5 months instead of 8. It meant freedom arriving that much sooner. It meant, "Thank you." Her voice came out rougher than intended. "That's very generous. It's fair compensation for exceptional work." He closed the ledger, but didn't leave. "I also wanted to tell you that you can take Sunday afternoons off if you'd like. You've been working 7 days straight since you arrived. That's not sustainable." "I don't mind the work. Nevertheless, you should have time to yourself. Read, rest, go into town if you want. Briggs can handle getting the men fed 1 meal a week." It was considerate, thoughtful even. Evelyn studied his scarred face, trying to understand the man behind it. "Why are you being kind to me, Mr. Hale?" The question seemed to surprise him. "I'm not being kind, I'm being practical. Overworked employees make mistakes, get resentful, leave. I don't want you to do any of those things." "Is that the only reason?" For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he said quietly, "You remind me that good work deserves recognition, that people who try hard, who show up every day and give their best, shouldn't be taken for granted. I may have forgotten that for a while." "Because of your wife?" His expression shuddered immediately, walls slamming back into place. "That's not a topic I discuss." "I'm sorry. I overstepped." "Yes, you did." But his tone wasn't angry, just firm, final. He picked up the ledger and moved toward the door, paused. "But, Mrs. Hart, you didn't overstep by much. That's more than most people can say." He left her with that cryptic statement and a racing heart. The dynamic between them shifted after that conversation, became something more complex than employer and employee. Lucas started spending more time in the kitchen, not hovering or interfering, just present. He'd sit at the small table in the corner and review paperwork while she cooked, the silence between them comfortable rather than awkward. Sometimes he'd ask her opinion on ranch matters, what the men were saying, how morale seemed, whether she'd noticed anything concerning. She'd answer honestly, and he'd listen with genuine attention, occasionally acting on her observations. Tom Porter's been looking tired lately, she mentioned one evening. More than usual. Might want to check if he's feeling all right. Lucas had sent the ranch doctor to examine Tom the next day. Turned out the young man had been fighting off a chest infection, trying to work through it. 2 days of rest and proper medicine set him right, and he'd returned to work singing Evelyn's praises for noticing what others had missed. "You pay attention," Lucas observed after that incident. "Really pay attention, not just to the surface." "So do you," Evelyn replied. "You knew something was wrong with Tom before I said anything. You were already watching him." "How'd you know that?" "Because you asked me if I'd noticed anything concerning. You don't ask questions you don't already have theories about." He'd smiled then. Actually smiled, a real expression that transformed his scarred face into something almost handsome. "You're learning to read me. You're not as complicated as you pretend to be." "Careful, Mrs. Hart. That sounds dangerously close to friendship." "Would that be so terrible?" The smile faded, replaced by something more guarded. "I don't know. I haven't had a friend in a long time." "Neither have I," Evelyn said softly. "Maybe we're both overdue." December arrived with the first serious snow, transforming Stonefield Ranch into something from a winter painting. Evelyn had never seen the landscape so beautiful. White drifts against dark stone, icicles hanging from the eaves like crystal decorations, the world hushed and clean. The men worked harder in the cold, burning more energy, needing more food. She adjusted her cooking accordingly, making everything richer, heartier, designed to keep them warm from the inside out. Christmas was approaching, which meant the men were getting restless, talking about families and homes, making plans for the few days Lucas gave them off. Evelyn had no plans, no family to visit, nowhere to go. She'd spend the holiday here, which suited her fine. The ranch felt more like home than anywhere she'd lived in years. One afternoon in mid-December, she was making cookies, dozens of them, enough for every man to have several, when Lucas appeared with a young boy she didn't recognize. The child couldn't have been more than 12, thin and underfed, with haunted eyes that suggested he'd seen more hardship than any kid should. "Mrs. Hart, this is Ethan Brooks. He'll be working here, helping with whatever needs doing." Lucas's hand rested on the boy's shoulder, protective. "He'll take meals with the men. Make sure he gets enough to eat." "Of course." Evelyn crouched down to the boy's level, smiled gently. "You like cookies, Ethan?" The kid nodded, not quite meeting her eyes. "Good. These will be ready in about 20 minutes. You can have the first batch, all to yourself. How's that sound?" "Really?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Really? Mr. Hale, maybe you could show Ethan where he'll be bunking while I finish these?" Lucas met her eyes over the boy's head, and something passed between them. Understanding, approval, a shared recognition that this child needed gentleness more than he needed work. "Good idea. Come on, son, let's get you settled." When they'd gone, Samuel Briggs appeared in the kitchen, drawn by the smell of baking. "Boss found the kid wandering the North Road yesterday. Parents died last month, no other family. He was heading toward town, hoping to find work. He's 12 years old." "I know, Boss knows too. But leaving him to freeze wasn't an option, and the orphanages in this territory are worse than the streets. So Lucas did what Lucas does, found a way to help without making it charity." Evelyn pulled the first batch of cookies from the oven, arranged them on a plate. "He does that often? Help people without making it obvious?" "More than you'd think. There's a reason his men are loyal. He's hard on everyone, himself most of all, but he takes care of his own." Briggs paused, then added, "You're his own now, Mrs. Hart, in case you hadn't figured that out." She had figured it out, actually. Somewhere between the wage increase and the time off, and the way Lucas had defended her kitchen, she'd realized she wasn't just an employee anymore. She was part of something larger, part of the strange family that Lucas Hale had built from broken pieces and second chances. Ethan Brooks became a fixture around the ranch, a quiet shadow who worked harder than seemed possible for someone so small. Evelyn made sure he ate properly. watching with satisfaction as color returned to his cheeks and his clothes started fitting better. The other men adopted him too, teaching him rope work and riding, including him in their rough camaraderie with a gentleness that suggested they all remembered being young and alone. And Lucas watched over all of it with those storm cloud eyes, saying little but missing nothing. 2 days before Christmas, a woman arrived at the ranch. She came in a fancy carriage with a driver in livery, stepped out wearing expensive furs, and an expression that suggested she owned whatever she looked at. Evelyn was in the kitchen when Samuel appeared, his face troubled. "Got a visitor for the boss. Lady named Marjorie Collins, says she's an old family friend. You know anything about her?" "Never heard the name." "Yeah, well, she's heard of you." Asked specifically if Lucas still had that widow woman cooking for him. Didn't sound friendly when she said it. Evelyn's instincts prickled with warning. "Where is she now?" Boss took her to his office. "But Mrs. Hart? Be careful around this one. She's got the look of someone who enjoys causing trouble." Evelyn didn't have to wait long to meet Marjorie Collins. The woman appeared in the kitchen an hour later, surveying the space with cold appraisal. She was beautiful in a calculated way. Perfect hair, flawless skin, everything arranged to maximum advantage. But her eyes were hard, measuring, finding Evelyn and dismissing her in the same glance. "So you're the famous Mrs. Hart." Her voice dripped with false sweetness. "Lucas speaks very highly of your cooking." "That's kind of him." Evelyn continued kneading bread, not stopping her work for this uninvited inspection. "I'm sure it is. I'm Marjorie Collins. My bank holds the note on several of Lucas's property expansions. We're old friends, his family and mine. I like to check in occasionally, make sure everything's running smoothly. The ranch seems to be doing well." "Oh, I'm sure the ranch is fine. It's the other elements I worry about." Marjorie moved closer, her smile sharpening. "You're a widow, I understand. Recently unfortunate circumstances?" "My husband passed several months ago, yes. And left you in debt, from what I hear. Quite scandalous. Gambling, wasn't it?" Evelyn set down the bread dough, met Marjorie's gaze directly. "My husband's failings are his own. They don't define me." "Don't they? You showed up here with nothing, desperate for work. Some might say you took advantage of Lucas's well-known soft heart for strays. First that boy, now you. People talk, Mrs. Hart." "Let them talk. They say you've gotten quite comfortable here, quite close to the boss. A single man, a desperate widow. It doesn't look proper." Ah, there it was. The real reason for this visit, for the false concern and veiled accusations. Marjorie Collins saw Evelyn as competition, as a threat to whatever claim she thought she had on Lucas Hale. The realization was almost laughable. Evelyn had no designs on Lucas beyond appreciation for his fair treatment and growing respect for his character. But explaining that to a woman who'd already decided to see her as an enemy would be useless. "I'm his cook, Mrs. Collins. Nothing more, nothing less. If you're concerned about impropriety, perhaps you should discuss it with Mr. Hale directly." "Perhaps I will, baby." Marjorie smiled cold and triumphant, as if she'd won some unspoken contest. "I'm staying for Christmas, at Lucas's invitation. I'm sure we'll be seeing quite a lot of each other. Do try not to burn anything important while I'm here." She swept out, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and cheaper malice. Evelyn returned to her bread with more force than necessary, her hands working the dough while her mind worked through implications. Marjorie Collins was trouble, the kind that came wrapped in money and social standing, armed with rumors and respectability. She could damage Evelyn's reputation with whispers, could poison Lucas against her with carefully placed doubts. This wasn't a fight Evelyn could win with cooking or hard work. This required different weapons. That evening, Lucas found her in the kitchen after dinner service. "Marjorie spoke to you." "She did. And said things she shouldn't have, I'm guessing from your expression." Evelyn chose her words carefully. She expressed concern about appearances, about propriety. She suggested people might talk about a widowed cook and her unmarried employer. Lucas's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the scarred skin. Marjorie enjoys creating problems where none exist. It's her particular talent. Then why invite her for Christmas? "I didn't. She invited herself, using our family's business relationship as leverage. Refusing would have created more trouble than allowing it." He crossed his arms, leaned against the counter. Don't let her get to you, Mrs. Hart. Her opinion means nothing. It might mean something to your other business associates, to the town. Reputations are fragile things, especially for women in my position. Your position is secure. You work for me, you do excellent work, and anyone who suggests otherwise can answer to me directly. The fierce protectiveness in his voice surprised her, warmed something in her chest that had been cold for a long time. Thank you. But Mr. Hale, Lucas, you should know that defending me might just confirm whatever she's implying. I don't care what she implies. His eyes met hers, intense and unwavering. You've earned your place here through honest work and decent character. That's all that matters. Everything else is noise. Evelyn wanted to believe him, but she'd learned the hard way that noise could drown out truth, that appearances often mattered more than reality, that a woman's reputation could be destroyed by whispers while a man's remained untouched. She'd survived her husband's betrayal, survived destitution, survived the road that had nearly killed her. She'd survive Marjorie Collins too. But it would require more than just surviving. It would require fighting back. Christmas morning arrived with fresh snow and false cheer. Evelyn woke before dawn as always, dressed in her best dress, which wasn't saying much, and made her way to the kitchen. She had a feast to prepare, enough food to feed the ranch hands who'd stayed through the holiday, plus Lucas and his unwelcome guest. The work would keep her hands busy and her mind focused, which was exactly what she needed. Marjorie Collins had spent the past 3 days making her presence felt in every possible way. She'd rearranged furniture in the main house, complained about the cold, monopolized Lucas's time with endless stories about their family's shared history, and made pointed comments about the help whenever Evelyn was within earshot. The ranch hands had taken to avoiding her, and even Samuel Briggs, who was unfailingly polite to everyone, had been heard muttering unflattering things about city women who don't know a damn thing about ranch life. Evelyn had maintained perfect professionalism throughout, serving meals with quiet efficiency, responding to Marjorie's barbs with calm indifference. She refused to give the woman the satisfaction of a reaction, refused to play whatever game Marjorie was trying to start. But the strain was wearing on her, making her shoulders tight and her sleep restless. She was rolling out pie crust when she heard voices from the hallway, Lucas and Marjorie, coming from the direction of his office. "I'm simply saying you should consider your position," Marjorie was saying, her tone dripping with false concern. "A man of your standing, employing a woman of questionable background." "There's nothing questionable about Mrs. Hart's background." Lucas's voice was flat, dangerous. "Her husband died and left her in debt. That's misfortune, not scandal." "Perhaps. But people will talk, Lucas. They already are. A young widow, living in your house, spending so much time in your company. She lives in the employee quarters and spends time in the kitchen doing the job I hired her for. If people want to make something ugly out of honest work, that's their failing, not hers. I'm only thinking of your reputation. My reputation survived a fire that killed my wife and left me looking like a monster. I think it can survive employing a good cook." The bitterness in his voice made Evelyn's hand still on the rolling pin. She'd never heard him speak of the fire before, never heard him acknowledge the scars that marked him. The pain beneath his words was raw enough to cut. Marjorie's tone shifted, became softer, more intimate. "Lucas, I know the fire changed you, changed everything, but it's been 5 years. Don't you think it's time to stop punishing yourself? To let someone help you move forward? And I suppose you're volunteering for that position? We've known each other since we were children. Our families have always hoped—" "Our family's hopes aren't my concern." His voice turned cold. "I appreciate your visit, Marjorie, but I think it's time you headed back to town. The holiday's over and I have work to do." "You're dismissing me?" She sounded genuinely shocked. "I'm suggesting you have better places to be than a working ranch. You've never been comfortable here anyway." "Because you've never made me comfortable. You lock yourself away in this stone prison, surround yourself with damaged people and broken things, refuse every opportunity for something better. This is my home. These are my people. And there's nothing broken about any of us that wasn't broken by life, which happens to everyone eventually. Now, if you'll excuse me—" "It's her, isn't it?" Marjorie's voice turned sharp, accusing. "That widow. You're protecting her, defending her, and everyone can see it. Do you have feelings for her, Lucas? Is that what this is about? The silence that followed was so complete Evelyn could hear her own heartbeat. She stood frozen in the kitchen, rolling pin forgotten, waiting for Lucas's answer with an intensity that surprised her. What I feel or don't feel is none of your business, he said finally. Mrs. Hart is an exceptional employee who's earned my respect and my protection. That's all you need to know. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. Safe travels, Marjorie. Don't let the door catch you on the way out. Footsteps retreated, fast and angry. A door slammed somewhere in the house. Evelyn released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding and returned to her pie crust with shaking hands. 20 minutes later, Lucas appeared in the kitchen doorway. He looked tired, the kind of exhaustion that came from emotional battles rather than physical work. She's leaving. Briggs is driving her to town now. I'm sorry you had to deal with that on Christmas. I'm not. He moved into the kitchen, poured himself coffee from the pot she always kept ready. I should have sent her away days ago. I was trying to be polite, maintain business relationships. Turns out some things aren't worth the cost. Evelyn transferred the pie crust to a dish, began crimping the edges. She thinks you have feelings for me. She thinks everyone's motives are as calculated as her own. Lucas took a long drink of coffee, watching her work. For what it's worth, I defended you because you deserve defending, not because of any ulterior motive. I know. And she did. Whatever was growing between them, friendship, understanding, something more complicated, it wasn't calculated. It was organic, unexpected, maybe even unwanted by both of them. But it was real. Thank you for that, for standing up for me. You'd do the same for me. Would I? She looked at him directly, curious. How do you know? Because that's who you are. You step between two fighting men to protect your kitchen. You watch over Ethan like he's your own. You notice when people are hurting and you try to help without making them feel weak. That's not strategy. That's character. The words settled into her chest, warm and solid. When was the last time someone had seen her clearly, recognized her worth without qualification or condition? Not since her mother died, probably. Certainly not during her marriage to Thomas, who'd loved her in his way but had never truly seen her. Same could be said about you, she replied softly. Taking in a starving boy, giving second chances to people the world's given up on, building something good out of all this stone and land. We're quite the pair of damaged saints, aren't we? His smile was wry, self-deprecating. I don't think either of us qualifies for sainthood, but maybe we're both trying to be better than our circumstances demanded. He raised his coffee cup in a small salute. I'll drink to that. They worked in companionable silence for a while, Lucas reviewing paperwork at the small table while Evelyn prepared the Christmas feast. It felt natural, comfortable, like they'd been doing this for years instead of months. The kitchen was warm, filled with good smells and better company, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Evelyn felt something close to contentment. The Christmas dinner was a triumph. Roasted beef, potatoes golden with butter, winter vegetables cooked to perfection, fresh bread that steamed when torn open, and 3 kinds of pie for dessert. The men ate until they couldn't move, praising every dish, thanking her with genuine warmth. Even Ethan smiled, a rare sight, and asked shyly if he could have a second slice of apple pie. You can have the whole pie if you want it, Evelyn told him, which made the other men laugh and protest good-naturedly. Lucas watched it all from his place at the head of the table, saying little but observing everything. When the meal ended and the men filed out, he helped her clear dishes without being asked, working alongside her as naturally as if they did this every day. You gave them more than a meal today, he said as they washed plates side by side. You gave them family, home, things some of them haven't had in a long time. That's what food should do. My mother believed that. I learned it from her. She sounds like she was a good woman. She was. I wish she could have met you. She would have liked you. Even with the scars and the terrible personality, Evelyn bumped his shoulder with hers, a gesture so casual and familiar it surprised them both. Especially with those. She always said the most interesting people were the ones life had tested. That easy people were boring. Well, I'm definitely not boring. No, she agreed, smiling. You're definitely not that. The afternoon stretched into evening, peaceful and quiet. Most of the hands had retired to the bunkhouse to play cards and tell stories. Ethan had fallen asleep by the fireplace in the main room, exhausted from excitement and too much food. Lucas and Evelyn sat in the kitchen, nursing coffee, talking about nothing and everything. "Can I ask you something?" Evelyn ventured after a comfortable silence. "About the fire?" His expression shuddered immediately. "I don't talk about that." "I know, but I think maybe you should. Not to me necessarily, but to someone. Carrying it alone is killing you." "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I? I carried Thomas's secrets for 3 months before they destroyed everything I had. The weight of them, the shame of them, even though they weren't mine to carry. I know what it's like to let pain become a prison." She set down her cup, met his eyes. "You don't have to tell me, but you don't have to keep punishing yourself either." "I couldn't save her." The words came out rough, like they'd been scraped from somewhere deep and dark. "The barn caught fire. I got most of the horses out, but Caroline went back in for the last one. Wouldn't listen when I told her to wait. The roof collapsed. I tried to get to her, got as far as the doorway before the flames drove me back. By the time help arrived, it was too late. She died because I wasn't strong enough, wasn't fast enough, wasn't enough." "Lucas, don't tell me it wasn't my fault. I've heard that from everyone. Doesn't change the fact that she's dead and I'm not." Evelyn reached across the table, covered his scarred hand with hers. He stiffened but didn't pull away. "I wasn't going to say it wasn't your fault. I was going to say that grief isn't measured in strength or speed, that sometimes terrible things happen and there's no one to blame, nothing to fix, no way to go back and make it different. I was going to say that Caroline wouldn't want you to spend the rest of your life in that burning doorway, frozen in the moment you couldn't save her." He stared at their joined hands, his jaw working. "How do you know what she'd want?" "Because I know what I'd want if I were her. I'd want the man I love to live, really live, not just survive. I'd want him to find peace, maybe even happiness again. I'd want him to know that my death wasn't his failure, just his tragedy." "You sound very certain." "I am certain. About this anyway." She squeezed his hand gently. "You saved Ethan, you know. Not from fire, but from freezing and starving and dying alone on some roadside. You saved me too, the day you gave me work when I had nothing. Maybe you couldn't save Caroline, but you've saved others. That should count for something." Lucas was quiet for a long time, processing her words. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing past the scars. For saying what needed saying. For being here." "Where else would I be?" She smiled, trying to lighten the moment. "You pay me to be here." "You know what I mean." "Yeah," she said softly. "I do." The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither of them was ready to name. Then Ethan stirred in the next room, calling out in his sleep, and the spell broke. Evelyn withdrew her hand, stood to check on the boy. Lucas let her go, but she felt his eyes following her, felt the weight of everything unspoken pressing against the careful boundaries they'd maintained. Things were changing between them, had been changing for weeks, maybe months. The question was whether they'd acknowledge it or pretend it wasn't happening. That night, lying in her bed, Evelyn stared at the ceiling and confronted truths she'd been avoiding. She cared about Lucas Hale, more than she should, more than was safe, more than she'd intended. Not because he'd given her work or wages or safety, but because of who he was beneath the scars and the silence. Because he was kind without being soft, strong without being cruel, damaged without being broken. Because when he looked at her, really looked at her, she felt seen in a way she'd never experienced before. It was dangerous. It was foolish. It was completely inappropriate given their respective positions. It was also undeniable. The question was what to do about it. She could leave, find work elsewhere, protect herself from potential heartbreak. But the thought of leaving Stonefield Ranch, leaving Lucas and Ethan and Samuel and all the rest, left her feeling hollow. This place had become home in a way nowhere else ever had. These people had become family. She'd stay. She'd work. and she'd see where this strange, unexpected connection led, even if it terrified her. January brought bitter cold and hard work. The ranch operated in survival mode, keeping animals fed and healthy, maintaining equipment, preparing for the spring. Evelyn's kitchen became the heart of the house, warm and welcoming, a refuge from the harsh weather outside. The men tracked in snow and stamped their feet and cupped their hands around hot coffee like it was liquid gold. Lucas spent more time in the kitchen than ever, often working at the small table while she cooked, their conversations ranging from ranch business to philosophy to childhood memories. They'd developed a rhythm, an easy partnership that felt natural and right. Sometimes their hands would brush while reaching for the same thing. Sometimes their eyes would meet across the room and hold for a moment too long. Neither of them acknowledged these moments, but neither of them stopped them either. On a particularly brutal afternoon in late January, Evelyn was preparing supper when she smelled smoke. Not cooking smoke. Something else. Something wrong. She stepped into the hallway and saw gray tendrils seeping from beneath a door at the far end of the house. "Fire!" Her voice rang through the building, clear and commanding. "Everyone out! Now!" Men appeared from various rooms, moving fast. Samuel materialized at her elbow. "Where?" "Storage room, I think. Get everyone outside and accounted for." "Where's Lucas?" "In his office." "I'll get him. Go!" She ran toward Lucas's office, shouting his name. He met her in the hallway, already moving. "What's burning?" "Storage room. Everyone's evacuating. Ethan." Lucas's face went pale beneath the scars. "He was organizing supplies in the storage room an hour ago. I told him he could finish tomorrow, but he wanted to—" He didn't finish the sentence, just ran toward the smoke. Evelyn ran after him, her heart pounding. The hallway was filling with smoke now, thick and acrid, making her eyes water. Lucas reached the storage room door and tried the handle. Locked from the inside. "Ethan, can you hear me?" He pounded on the door. No response. "Step back." He threw his shoulder against the door once, twice. The third time it gave way. Smoke poured out, so thick Evelyn could barely see. Lucas disappeared into it without hesitation, and she heard him calling the boy's name, heard coughing, heard something heavy fall. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to get out, to save herself. But Lucas and Ethan were in there, and she couldn't leave them. Wouldn't leave them. Evelyn pulled her apron up over her nose and mouth and plunged into the smoke. The heat was immediate and terrible. She couldn't see more than a few inches ahead, couldn't breathe without choking. She stayed low, remembering something her father had told her about smoke rising, and called out for Lucas. "Here!" His voice came from the left, strangled. "I've got him, but the way's blocked." She followed his voice, hands outstretched, until she found them. Lucas was half carrying, half dragging Ethan toward where the door should have been, but shelving had collapsed in the heat, blocking their path. The boy was unconscious, his small body limp and terrifying. "This way!" Evelyn grabbed Lucas's arm, pulled him in a different direction. There was a window, she remembered, on the far wall. If they could reach it, break it, they could get out. The smoke was thicker now, the heat intense enough to blister skin. Her lungs burned, her eyes streamed, but she pulled them forward, step by step, until she felt the wall under her hands. The window was above her head. She'd never reach it, couldn't break it, couldn't— Lucas shoved Ethan into her arms, and she staggered under the weight. "Hold him!" He grabbed a metal rod from the collapsed shelving and swung it at the window. Glass shattered. Cold air rushed in, bringing precious oxygen, but also feeding the fire behind them. Lucas knocked out the remaining shards, turned back to her. "Give him to me. I'll pass him through, then pull you after." She handed over the boy, watched Lucas maneuver him through the window frame. Someone outside shouted, arms reaching to take Ethan's unconscious form. Then Lucas turned back to her. "Your turn." Behind them, something exploded. The fire had reached something flammable, chemicals or oil, and the blast knocked them both forward. Evelyn felt Lucas's arms close around her as they fell, felt him turn his body so he hit the floor first, cushioning her impact. Her hands were screaming pain, torn and bleeding from where she'd grabbed hot metal without thinking. "Can you stand?" Lucas's voice was rough with smoke inhalation. "Yes." "Then climb. Now!" He boosted her toward the window and she scrambled through, falling into the snow outside. Hands caught her, pulled her away from the building. She turned back, saw Lucas hauling himself through the window, just as another section of roof collapsed behind him. He tumbled into the snow, and Samuel and two other men dragged him clear. The storage room was fully engulfed now, flames visible through the broken window. But everyone was out. Everyone was safe. Evelyn knelt in the snow, coughing until she thought her lungs would tear, her burned hands buried in cold white that should have helped, but only made the pain sharper. She watched the men form a bucket brigade, fighting to keep the fire from spreading to the rest of the house. Watched Lucas, covered in soot and blood, directing them with the same calm authority he brought to everything. And she watched Ethan, lying unconscious in the snow, his chest rising and falling shallowly. The ranch doctor arrived within the hour, summoned by someone's quick thinking. He examined Ethan first, pronounced the smoke inhalation serious but survivable with rest and care. Then he treated Evelyn's hands, wrapping them in bandages after applying salve that burned worse than the original injury. Lucas he had to order to sit still, the rancher insisting he was fine even as blood seeped through his shirt from cuts sustained in the collapse. "You're an idiot, Hale," the doctor said without heat. "That's the second time you've run into a burning building. You planning to make it a habit?" "Only when people I care about are inside." The doctor's eyes flicked to Evelyn, then back to Lucas. "Well, try to find safer hobbies. I'm too old to keep patching you up." They saved the house. The storage room was a total loss, the hallway damaged, but the fire didn't spread beyond that. By midnight, the emergency was over, the men exhausted and filthy but victorious. Ethan had woken up, coughing but alive, asking in a scared whisper if he'd caused the fire. "No," Lucas told him firmly. "Old wiring, probably. Nothing you did wrong. You understand?" The boy nodded, tears tracking through the soot on his face. "You're safe now. That's all that matters." Evelyn sat in the kitchen long after everyone else had gone to bed, her bandaged hands resting on the table, her mind replaying the afternoon in vivid detail. The smoke, the heat, the terror of thinking they might not make it out. Lucas's body shielding hers when they fell, the sound of Ethan's labored breathing, the smell of her own burned flesh. She'd survived. They'd all survived. But it had been close. Too close. "Can't sleep?" She looked up to find Lucas in the doorway, cleaned up now but still showing the marks of battle. Fresh bandages on his arms, a cut across his forehead, exhaustion in every line of his body. "Too much adrenaline," she said. "You?" "Same." He moved into the kitchen, sat down across from her. "How are your hands?" "Painful, but they'll heal." She flexed her fingers experimentally, winced. "How are you?" "I've been better. I've been worse." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "You saved us today. Me and Ethan both. If you hadn't come in, if you hadn't known about that window, you would have found another way. Maybe, maybe not." He reached across the table, carefully took one of her bandaged hands in his scarred ones. "You didn't hesitate. You ran into fire to help us. Do you know how rare that is? How extraordinary. You did the same for Ethan. That's different. He's a child, my responsibility. But you had every reason to run, to save yourself. You chose to stay." "Of course I stayed." Evelyn met his eyes. Let him see the truth in hers. "Where else would I go? You were in there. Both of you. I couldn't just leave you." The air between them shifted, became charged with everything they'd been dancing around for months. Lucas's thumb traced small circles on her wrist, just above the bandages, his touch gentle, despite his own injuries. "Evelyn?" Her name sounded different in his voice, intimate and careful. "I need to tell you something. And you can tell me to shut up, tell me I'm out of line, tell me it's inappropriate given everything. But after today, after almost losing you, I can't keep pretending." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Pretending what?" "That you're just my cook, just my employee, that I haven't been falling for you since the day you showed up with nothing but a skillet and enough courage to demand a chance." He paused, seemed to gather himself. "I care about you. More than I should, more than is probably smart given our circumstances. But I can't help it and I don't want to." You make this place feel like home again. You make me want to be better than the bitter, broken man I've been hiding behind. And if that makes you uncomfortable, if you don't feel the same, I'll never mention it again and we can go back to... She kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't calculated, just a sudden overwhelming need to show him what words couldn't adequately express. Her bandaged hands came up to cup his scarred face, and she pressed her lips to his with all the pent-up emotion of months of carefully maintained distance. He froze for half a second, then kissed her back with a fierce tenderness that made her chest ache. His hands found her waist, pulled her closer despite the awkward angle across the table. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes searched hers with wonder and disbelief. "So I'm guessing you feel the same." Evelyn laughed, the sound shaky and breathless, and entirely genuine. "You're not that dense, Lucas Hale." "Just wanted to be sure." He smiled, that rare, real smile that transformed his entire face. "Because I'm about to do something potentially stupid, and I want to make sure you're on board." "What's that?" "I'm going to ask you to marry me. Not today, not while we're both injured and traumatized and running on no sleep, but soon, because life's too short and too unpredictable to waste time pretending we don't want what we want. And I want you, Evelyn Hart. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up every morning knowing you're here, knowing you're mine, knowing I'm yours. So when I ask, and I will ask, what are you going to say?" She looked at this man who'd given her a chance when she'd had nothing, who'd seen past her desperation to the strength beneath, who'd valued her work and respected her dignity and somehow fallen in love with her along the way. This man with his scars and his shadows and his fundamental decency. This man who'd run into fire without hesitation, who protected the vulnerable, who was asking her not just to be his cook, but his partner in everything. "I'm going to say yes," she told him. "When you ask, whenever you ask, the answer is yes." His smile widened into something close to joy. "Good. That's good." They sat there in the kitchen, hands clasped across the table, while outside the winter night wrapped around Stonefield Ranch like a blessing. They'd survived fire and smoke and near death. They'd found each other in the aftermath of their separate tragedies, and tomorrow they'd start building something new from the ashes of what had burned away. The morning after this fire brought consequences neither of them had anticipated. Evelyn woke to find her hands so swollen and stiff she could barely flex her fingers, the bandages spotted with seepage from the burns beneath. The doctor had warned her this would happen, that the second day was always worse, but knowing didn't make it easier. She couldn't cook like this. Couldn't work. And not working meant failing the men who depended on her, meant proving inadequate right when she needed to be strongest. Lucas found her in the kitchen at dawn, staring helplessly at the cold stove. He'd clearly had the same rough night. His face was drawn with pain, fresh blood seeping through the bandage on his arm. But he moved with purpose as he surveyed the situation. "Samuel's handling breakfast," he said without preamble. "He's no cook, but he can manage eggs and coffee well enough for one morning. You need to rest those hands. The men need proper food, especially after yesterday. The men need you to heal so you can cook for them next week, and the week after that. One morning of Samuel's scrambled eggs won't kill anyone." He moved closer, his voice softening. "Let people help you, Evelyn. You've been taking care of everyone else since you got here. Let us take care of you for once." It went against every instinct she'd developed over the past months, but the throbbing agony in her hands left her little choice. She nodded, let him guide her to a chair, accepted the coffee he poured with his own injured hands. They sat together in the early morning quiet, two damaged people finding comfort in each other's presence. "We should talk about last night," Lucas said after a while. "About what we said, what we decided." Evelyn's heart skipped, sudden fear flooding through her. Had he changed his mind in the harsh light of morning? Realized the foolishness of proposing to his cook, the scandal it would create, the complications it would bring? "If you want to take it back..." "I don't." He set down his coffee, met her eyes directly. "Not even a little. But I want to make sure you don't either. You were exhausted, traumatized, running on adrenaline. If you need time to think, to really consider what a life with me would mean, I'll understand." "What would it mean?" She asked it seriously, wanting his honest answer. "Beyond the obvious. It would mean people talking. Some will say you manipulated me, used your position to secure a wealthy husband. Others will call me a fool for marrying the help. Marjorie Collins will probably throw a fit and try to ruin both our reputations." He paused, his scarred face serious. "It would mean being tied to a man who's still grieving his first wife, who'll probably always carry some guilt about her death. A man with scars inside and out. A man who's not easy, not simple, not what anyone would call a good catch. You're selling yourself short. I'm being realistic. You deserve to know what you're signing up for." Evelyn considered his words, turned them over in her mind. "What you're describing sounds hard, complicated, potentially painful." She reached across the table with her bandaged hands, laid them over his scarred ones. "It also sounds honest, real, nothing like my first marriage, which was built on secrets and lies and pretty surfaces covering rot. I'll take hard and honest over easy and false any day." "Even knowing it'll cost you?" "Everything worthwhile costs something. I learned that the hard way." She squeezed his hands gently despite the pain it caused. "Besides, you're not the only one bringing complications to this arrangement. I'm a widow with debts and a scandalous past. I showed up here desperate and broke. I have nothing to offer except my work and my word." "That's not nothing. That's everything." He lifted one of her hands carefully, pressed a kiss to her bandaged knuckles. "Your work is exceptional. Your word is gold. And you're the strongest person I've ever met. Don't diminish that." "Then we're agreed? We move forward despite the complications?" "We move forward, though I'd still like to wait a bit before making any announcements. Let your hands heal. Let the dust settle from the fire. Give people time to adjust to the idea gradually rather than shocking them all at once." It was sensible, practical. It also gave them time to be sure, to test this new dimension of their relationship before making it permanent. Evelyn appreciated the thoughtfulness even as part of her wanted to rush forward, to claim this happiness before fate could snatch it away again. "How long are we talking?" "A month? 6 weeks? However long it takes for you to be certain this is what you want." "I'm certain now." "Maybe, but indulge me anyway, me." His smile was slight but genuine. "I've waited 5 years to feel this way again. I can wait another month to make it official." The month that followed tested them both in unexpected ways. Evelyn's hands healed slowly, the burns leaving angry red scars across her palms and fingers. She regained function gradually, relearning tasks that had once been automatic, fighting through pain and frustration to reclaim her competence. Lucas worked beside her during those weeks, helping with tasks she couldn't manage alone, never making her feel inadequate or useless. Their relationship shifted into something deeper, more intimate. They spent evenings together after the men had retired, talking about everything and nothing, learning each other's histories and hopes. Lucas told her about Caroline, not the tragedy of her death, but the joy of their life together, the way she'd laughed and challenged him and made him want to be better. Evelyn appreciated that he could speak of his first wife without erasure, that he didn't pretend the past didn't exist. She told him about Thomas, about the slow realization that her husband had built their entire life on unstable ground, about the shame and betrayal she'd felt discovering his debts after his death. Lucas listened without judgment, his hand steady on hers, his presence a reminder that past failures didn't define future possibilities. But the outside world was less understanding. Word of the fire had spread through the territory, and with it came rumors. Some said Mrs. Hart had set the fire to make herself indispensable. Others whispered that she and Lucas had been carrying on an affair for months, that the whole rescue was staged for appearances. The stories grew more elaborate with each telling, fed by distance and imagination and the human appetite for scandal. Evelyn first heard the rumors from Samuel, who came to her looking uncomfortable and angry. "I'm not one to repeat gossip, Mrs. Hart, but I figure you should know what people are saying in town." "Tell me." He did, his jaw tight with suppressed fury. "It's garbage, all of it. Anyone who's been here knows you're not that kind of woman, knows the boss respects you for your work and character. But the town folks don't know you, and they like a good story better than the truth." "Let them talk," Evelyn said, though the words hurt more than she'd admit. "We know the truth. That's what matters." "The boss says the same thing, but Mrs. Hart, these rumors could cause real problems. For you, for him, for the ranch's reputation. The bank might use them as an excuse to call in loans. Business partners might back away, and you—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. A woman's reputation is fragile. Once damaged, it's hard to repair. She knew this. Had lived this truth when Thomas's debts became public, when neighbors who'd smiled at her for years suddenly found reasons to cross the street rather than speak to her. The injustice of it burned, that her hard work and honest conduct mattered less than malicious speculation, that she could be destroyed by whispers while doing nothing wrong. What do you suggest? Boss is planning to go to town next week. Face down the rumors directly. Might help if you went with him. Let people see you're not hiding, not ashamed. Show them there's nothing improper going on. Except there was something going on, just not what the rumors suggested. She and Lucas had been careful, maintaining professional distance in front of others, keeping their growing feelings private. But going to town together would put them under intense scrutiny, would subject her to judgment and speculation she wasn't sure she could handle gracefully. When she mentioned Samuel's suggestion to Lucas that evening, he frowned. I don't want to subject you to that. The gossips can say what they want about me. I've got thick skin. But you shouldn't have to defend yourself for doing nothing wrong. Hiding makes it worse, makes it look like we have something to be ashamed of. We don't. Then we face them together. Evelyn straightened her spine, channeling the courage that had brought her this far. I've survived worse than small-town gossip. I can survive this too. The trip to town was scheduled for the following Saturday. Evelyn spent the intervening days preparing mentally, rehearsing responses to potential accusations, steeling herself for confrontation. Lucas watched her preparations with concern and admiration in equal measure. You don't have to do this, he said the night before they were set to leave. We could just ignore them, let the rumors die on their own. Rumors don't die. They multiply. She folded a clean dress carefully, her scarred hands moving with practiced efficiency despite lingering stiffness. Besides, if we're going to build a life together, we need to establish now that we won't be cowed by other people's opinions. Better to face it head on than let it fester. Saturday dawned cold and clear. They rode to town in the wagon, Samuel driving, conversation sparse. Evelyn wore her best dress, still not fancy but clean and respectable, and kept her chin high, even as her stomach churned with nerves. Lucas sat beside her, his presence solid and reassuring, a reminder she wasn't facing this alone. The town came into view, and Evelyn felt the weight of watching eyes even before they arrived. People on the street stopped to stare as the wagon rolled past. Conversation ceased. Women whispered behind their hands. The judgment was palpable, pressing against her like a physical force. Lucas helped her down from the wagon with careful courtesy, his hand steady under her elbow. They walked together toward the general store, the most public place in town. The location guaranteed to maximize their visibility. Every step felt like walking through fire again, except this time the flames were made of stares and whispers instead of heat and smoke. Inside the store, the proprietor, a middle-aged man named Harold Atwood, looked up from his ledger and his expression shuddered immediately. Mr. Hale, I wasn't expecting you today. Needed some supplies. This is Mrs. Hart, my cook. She'll be selecting what we need. Mrs. Hart. Atwood's tone was carefully neutral, revealing nothing. I've heard about you. I'm sure you have. Evelyn met his gaze squarely. The question is whether you believe what you've heard or prefer to form your own opinions based on facts. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. I prefer facts, generally speaking. Good. Then here are the facts. I work for Mr. Hale. I cook for his ranch hands and manage his household supplies. I do my job well, maintain professional conduct at all times, and have given no one any legitimate cause for complaint. Everything else is speculation and malice. That's quite a speech. It's quite a lot of rumors to address. She moved past him to begin examining the available goods, refusing to be intimidated. Now, do you have fresh flour? The last batch was acceptable, but not ideal. For a moment, Atwood just stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. I do, actually. Got a new shipment from the mill yesterday. Better quality than the usual. Let me show you. The tension broke. Over the next hour, Evelyn conducted her business with calm professionalism, discussing supplies and prices with Atwood like there was nothing unusual about the situation. Other customers came and went, watching covertly, but she ignored them. Lucas stayed close, not hovering but present, his silent support speaking louder than any words. They were loading supplies into the wagon when Marjorie Collins appeared, descending from her carriage like an avenging angel in expensive fabrics. Her expression was triumph mixed with malice, her eyes glittering with the anticipation of confrontation. "Lucas, how unexpected to see you in town." Her gaze slid to Evelyn, dismissive and cold. "And you brought your cook. How domestic." "Marjorie," Lucas's voice was flat, warning. "We're just finishing up here." "Oh, I'm sure you are. Finishing up, moving on to the next victim. Tell me, Lucas, have you informed Mrs. Hart about the other women you've employed over the years, the ones who thought they were special before you discarded them?" It was a lie. Evelyn knew it immediately from the way Lucas stiffened, from the calculated cruelty in Marjorie's tone. This was designed to wound, to sow doubt, to destroy the fragile new thing growing between them. "That's enough." Evelyn stepped forward before Lucas could respond, positioning herself between him and Marjorie's venom. "I don't know what you hope to accomplish with these lies, Mrs. Collins, but let me be clear about something. I'm not interested in your opinion of me or my employer. I'm not intimidated by your money or your social position. And I'm certainly not foolish enough to believe the word of a woman who's shown nothing but spite since the day we met." Marjorie's face flushed with anger. "How dare you speak to me that way? You're nothing but a desperate widow who threw herself at the first man who showed her kindness." "I'm a widow who lost everything and rebuilt from nothing through hard work and determination. You're a wealthy woman who's apparently so unhappy with her own life that she needs to destroy other people's happiness to feel relevant." Evelyn's voice stayed level, calm, each word precisely delivered. "Now, which of us do you think people will respect more in the long run?" A crowd had gathered, drawn by the confrontation. Evelyn could feel their attention, could sense the scales tipping as they assessed the two women. Marjorie with her expensive clothes and obvious malice, Evelyn with her worn dress and quiet dignity. The narrative was shifting, rewriting itself in real time. "You'll regret this," Marjorie hissed. "Both of you. I have influence in this territory, business connections that can what?" Lucas finally spoke, his voice cutting and cold. "Ruin me? I've survived worse than your petty revenge, Marjorie. And as for Mrs. Hart, she's faced actual hardship, real loss. Your threats are nothing compared to what she's already endured and overcome." He turned to Evelyn, his expression softening. "We're done here. Let's go home." Home. The word resonated through her chest, warm and solid. Not his home, or the ranch, or the place she worked. Home. Theirs, together. They climbed into the wagon, Samuel flicking the reins to start them moving. As they pulled away, Evelyn looked back to see Marjorie standing alone on the street, her face twisted with fury and frustration. The crowd had dispersed, clearly unimpressed by her performance. Whatever power she'd hoped to wield through gossip and innuendo had crumbled against the simple truth Evelyn had spoken. "That was remarkable," Lucas said quietly as the town disappeared behind them. "The way you faced her down. I've never seen Marjorie so thoroughly defeated. She made it easy. Everything she said was a lie, and lies always crumble when you shine truth on them." Evelyn flexed her scarred hands, felt the ache of old injuries. "Besides, I meant what I said. I've survived real hardship. Her nasty words are just noise." "Still, not everyone could have stood there and defended themselves like that. You were fearless." "Not fearless. Terrified, actually." She smiled slightly. "But I've learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs doing despite the fear. You taught me that." "I taught you?" "You run into burning buildings despite being terrified of fire. That's courage. I can face down a spiteful woman despite being terrified of public judgment. Same principle, different application." Lucas reached over, took her hand carefully. "We make a good team." "Yeah," Evelyn agreed. "We really do." The confrontation with Marjorie had unexpected consequences. Within days, the narrative in town shifted. People who'd been quick to believe the worst started questioning the source of those rumors, started remembering Marjorie's reputation for vindictive behavior when she didn't get her way. Harold Atwood apparently told everyone who'd listen about Mrs. Hart's dignified conduct and professional competence. Other business owners who'd witnessed the street confrontation shared their own observations, painting Evelyn as a woman of character unfairly maligned. The tide turned. Not completely, there were still those who preferred scandal to truth, but enough that the immediate threat to Evelyn's reputation faded. She could go to town now without feeling like every eye was judging her, could conduct business without the weight of assumption and accusation. More importantly, the experience had crystallized something for both her and Lucas. They'd faced external pressure together and emerged stronger. They'd defended each other without hesitation. They'd proven, at least to themselves, that what they were building could withstand outside forces. 2 weeks after the confrontation in town, Lucas found Evelyn in the kitchen after dinner service. The ranch was quiet, the men settled for the evening, and the winter sun setting through the window painted everything in shades of gold and amber. He stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching her work, and when she turned to find him there, the expression on his face made her heart skip. "I said I'd wait a month," he began. "Give us both time to be sure, let the complications settle. But it's been 6 weeks now, and I'm more certain than I've ever been about anything. So I'm going to ask you now, Evelyn Hart, and I need you to answer honestly. Will you marry me?" She'd known this was coming, had spent weeks preparing for this exact question, but actually hearing it spoken aloud, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes behind all those scars, made her throat tight with emotion. "Yes." The word came out steady, certain, carrying the weight of everything she felt. "Yes, I'll marry you. Not because you saved me, not because I need security, but because I love you. Because you're the best man I've ever known. Because building a life with you sounds like the greatest adventure I could possibly have." He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, pulled her into his arms, kissed her with a fierce joy that made her dizzy. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning, he pulled a small box from his pocket. "I should have had this ready before asking, but I wanted to make sure you'd say yes before I spent the money." He opened it to reveal a simple gold band, unadorned but beautiful in its plainness. "It's not fancy. It's perfect." Evelyn held out her left hand, let him slide the ring onto her finger. It fit like it had been made for her, warm and solid and real. "When?" "Whenever you want. Tomorrow, next month, next year. I'm not in a hurry as long as I know you're mine." "Spring," she decided. "After the worst of winter passes. Give people time to adjust to the idea. Give us time to plan properly. And Lucas? I want to pay off my debts first. Thomas's creditors. I've been saving, and with the wage increase you gave me, I'll have enough by March. I want to come to you free of that burden without owing anyone anything." He started to protest, to offer to pay it himself, but she pressed her fingers to his lips. "Let me do this. Let me close that chapter of my life on my own terms. It matters to me." After a moment, he nodded. "All right, we'll wait until you're ready, until everything's settled how you need it to be." "But Evelyn?" "Yes?" "Those debts weren't yours to begin with. You don't owe anyone anything, not really. You know that, right?" "I know, but paying them anyway, clearing Thomas's name even though he didn't deserve it, ending that part of my past with dignity instead of running from it. That's for me, not for anyone else. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense." He kissed her forehead gently. "You're remarkable, you know that?" "You keep saying that. Eventually I might start believing it." "Good. You should." They stood there in the kitchen, wrapped in each other's arms, while outside the winter evening deepened into night. Evelyn looked at the ring on her finger, felt the solid warmth of Lucas against her, and marveled at the strange journey that had brought her here. From rock bottom to this moment. From 3 pennies and a skillet to a home, a family, a future worth building. She'd arrived at Stonefield Ranch broken and desperate, offering only her ability to cook in exchange for survival. She'd leave it as Lucas Hale's wife, partner in everything, having found not just security, but belonging, not just work, but purpose, not just a second chance, but a second life, one built on truth and trust, and mutual respect. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would still be gossip, still be judgment, still be people who questioned their choices. But they'd face it together, 2 scarred survivors who'd learned that strength came not from avoiding damage, but from rising despite it. In the morning, they'd announce their engagement to the ranch hands. In the spring, they'd marry in a simple ceremony that honored what mattered most. But tonight, They simply held each other in the quiet kitchen, savoring this perfect moment of certainty before the world rushed back in with all its complications. "Thank you," Evelyn whispered against his chest. "For what?" "For seeing me. For taking a chance on a desperate woman with nothing but a skillet and some stubborn pride. For building this with me." Lucas tightened his arms around her. "Thank you for walking up to my door that day instead of keeping on down the road. For staying when staying was hard. For choosing me despite all the very good reasons not to." "There were never any good reasons not to choose you. You just thought there were." He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest into hers. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I am better than I give myself credit for." "Definitely better," she confirmed, though still occasionally stubborn and difficult. "Same could be said about you." "Then we're well matched." "Yeah," Lucas agreed softly. "We really are." The announcement of their engagement rippled through Stonefield Ranch like a stone dropped in still water, spreading outward in concentric circles of reaction and adjustment. The ranch hands received the news with a mixture of approval and knowing grins, many admitting they'd seen it coming for weeks. Samuel clapped Lucas on the back hard enough to make him stumble, then pulled Evelyn into a careful hug that respected her healing hands. "About time," the foreman said with genuine warmth. "You two have been dancing around each other since Christmas. Good to see you finally caught up to what the rest of us already knew." Ethan's reaction was quieter, but no less meaningful. The boy had grown in the months since his rescue, filling out with regular meals and losing some of the haunted look that had marked him when he first arrived. He approached Evelyn after dinner that evening, shy and hesitant. "Does this mean you're staying forever?" he asked, his voice small. "You won't leave, even if things get hard again?" Evelyn knelt down to his level, ignoring the protest from her knees. "I'm staying forever. This is home now, Ethan, for both of us." "Good." He threw his arms around her neck in a quick, fierce hug, then darted away before she could respond, leaving her blinking back tears in the empty hallway. But not everyone responded with such uncomplicated joy. Word reached town within days, carried by ranch hands on supply runs and spread through the territory's efficient gossip network. The reactions were mixed and often predictable. Some celebrated the match as a romantic triumph, a widow and a widower finding second chances together. Others saw it as confirmation of their worst suspicions, proof that Evelyn had been angling for this outcome all along. The worst blow came from an unexpected direction. 3 weeks after the engagement, a formal letter arrived from the Territorial Bank, signed by Marjorie Collins in her capacity as senior loan officer. The language was carefully legal, free of personal animosity, but the message was clear. Due to concerns about management stability and reputational risk, the bank was calling in several of Lucas's outstanding loans. Full payment was expected within 90 days. Lucas read the letter twice, his scarred face expressionless, then set it down on his desk with deliberate care. Evelyn, sitting across from him, watched the muscle in his jaw tighten, the only outward sign of the anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. "She can't do this," Evelyn said, her own fury rising hot and protective. "This is personal revenge dressed up as business. There must be some way to fight it. Legally, she can absolutely do this. The loans are callable under certain conditions, and reputational concerns falls under the bank's discretion clause. She's within her rights, even if her motivations are pure spite." He stood, moved to the window, stared out at the ranch he'd built from nothing. 90 days. "I don't have that kind of liquidity. Most of my capital is tied up in land, cattle, equipment. To raise the cash she's demanding, I'd have to sell off significant portions of the ranch." "How much are we talking about?" "Enough that it would cripple operations. We'd survive, but barely. Everything I've built over the last 15 years cut down to a fraction of what it is now." His voice was controlled, but she heard the devastation beneath. "She knows exactly what she's doing. She can't destroy me completely, but she can hurt me badly enough that recovery would take years." Evelyn's mind raced through possibilities, discarding options as quickly as she considered them. They could try to find alternative financing, but no bank would take on loans another institution had deemed too risky. They could sell off portions of the herd, but cattle prices were down and it wouldn't raise enough. They could delay the wedding, cut expenses to the bone, but 90 days wasn't enough time to generate the funds needed. My debt payment, she said suddenly. The money I've been saving, how much is it? Evelyn, no. That's your money, for your fresh start. How much is it compared to what you need? Lucas hesitated, clearly reluctant to even consider it. It's a fraction, maybe 5% of what's required. It wouldn't be enough to make a real difference. But combined with selling some cattle, cutting expenses, maybe taking on a temporary partner for capital injection, it could be part of a larger solution, couldn't it? I won't take your savings. You've worked too hard for that money, sacrificed too much. Those funds represent your freedom from Thomas's mistakes. And this ranch represents your life's work, everything you've built, everyone who depends on you for their livelihood. 23 men, Lucas, plus Ethan, plus me, soon enough. What happens to all of us if Marjorie succeeds? She moved to stand beside him at the window, her hand finding his. We're supposed to be partners. Partners share burdens, especially when the burden is this heavy. It's not fair to you. Life isn't fair, we both know that, but we get to choose how we respond to unfairness. I choose to fight. She squeezed his hand, felt him squeeze back. Besides, paying off Thomas's debts was about closing a chapter. Maybe this is how that chapter is supposed to close, by using that money to protect something that actually matters instead of just settling old accounts. Lucas turned to face her fully, his storm cloud eyes searching hers. You're sure? Because once we go down this path, once we start liquidating assets and restructuring, there's no going back. And if it's not enough, if we still lose everything, then we'll build again, together this time. She spoke with a certainty she felt in her bones. You gave me a second chance when I had nothing. Now I'm giving you one back. That's what love is, isn't it? Choosing each other over and over, especially when it's hard. He pulled her into his arms, held her tight enough that she felt his heart beating against hers. I don't deserve you. Yes, you do. You just don't believe it yet. She pulled back slightly, looked up at him with determination. Now, let's figure out how to save this ranch. We've got 90 days and we're not wasting a single one. The next weeks were a blur of strategic planning and difficult decisions. Lucas consulted with Samuel in his most trusted hands, laying out the situation with characteristic honesty. To Evelyn's surprise, every single man offered to defer their wages or take pay cuts to help with the cash flow crisis. She argued against it. These men had families, obligations of their own, but they remained insistent. You gave me work when I was blacklisted everywhere else, one of the older hands said. Believed me when I said I didn't steal that money. I'd be dead or in prison if not for you, boss. I can live on half wages for a few months. You took my brother in when he was running from some bad decisions, another added. Gave him honest work and a chance to make things right. We pay our debts around here. The loyalty humbled Lucas and strengthened Evelyn's resolve. These men weren't just employees, they were family, bound by something stronger than contracts or wages. They were worth fighting for. Evelyn threw herself into finding every possible efficiency in the household budget. She renegotiated supply contracts, found cheaper alternatives without sacrificing quality, eliminated waste with ruthless precision. She started a kitchen garden, planned for spring planting, calculated ways to reduce feed costs through better pasture management. Every penny saved was a penny toward keeping the ranch intact. She also made a trip to town, to the bank, to face Marjorie Collins directly. The bank was imposing, all dark wood and brass fixtures designed to intimidate. Evelyn walked through the doors with her spine straight and her head high, refusing to be cowed by architecture or atmosphere. She requested a meeting with Mrs. Collins and was made to wait for 45 minutes, a power play so obvious it was almost insulting. When finally shown into Marjorie's office, Evelyn found the woman behind an enormous desk, every inch the successful banker, her earlier malice hidden behind professional polish. Mrs. Hart, I was surprised to receive your request for a meeting. Marjorie's smile was cold, controlled. I assume you're here to plead for leniency on Lucas's loans. I'm here to make you an offer. Evelyn sat without being invited, met Marjorie's gaze with unflinching directness. You want to hurt Lucas because he chose me over you. That's personal, not professional, and we both know it. So let's talk honestly about what would satisfy you. I don't know what you're implying. Yes, you do. You're a smart woman, Marjorie. Smart enough to know that destroying Lucas's ranch won't actually win you what you want. It'll just make you feel powerful temporarily while permanently branding you as vindictive and petty. Is that really the reputation you want in business circles? Marjorie's expression hardened. Careful, Mrs. Hart. You're in no position to make threats. I'm not threatening. I'm offering perspective. Evelyn leaned forward slightly. Lucas and I are getting married in the spring. Nothing you do will change that. But how this plays out determines what kind of relationship you have with the most successful rancher in 3 counties. You can be the woman who helped during a difficult time, who showed business acumen and strategic thinking, or you can be the woman everyone knows acted out of spite, who let personal feelings interfere with professional judgment. And why would I care what people think? Because you're ambitious, because you want to move up in banking, maybe even run your own institution someday. Because a reputation for fairness and strategic thinking opens doors, while a reputation for vindictiveness closes them. Evelyn pulled an envelope from her bag, placed it on the desk. Here's what I'm proposing. Lucas will pay back 40% of the called loans immediately. The remainder gets restructured over 3 years at the current interest rate. In exchange, you get to look magnanimous, you maintain a valuable business relationship, and you position yourself as someone who finds creative solutions rather than just wielding the hammer. Marjorie opened the envelope, scanned the detailed proposal inside. Evelyn had worked on it for 3 days, running numbers until her eyes crossed, making sure every figure was accurate and defensible. It represented everything they could scrape together: Evelyn's savings, the sale of some cattle, the deferred wages, loans against equipment. It was tight, painful, but viable. This still leaves you vulnerable, Marjorie observed. 1 bad season and you default. That's our risk to take. The question is whether you're willing to accept a reasonable business arrangement or if you'd rather pursue destruction for its own sake. For a long moment, Marjorie said nothing, her eyes moving between the proposal and Evelyn's face. Evelyn forced herself to remain still, to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. This was a gamble, appealing to Marjorie's business sense over her personal feelings, and it could easily backfire. "You're tougher than you look," Marjorie said finally. "I underestimated you." People often do, usually to their regret. A slight smile crossed Marjorie's face, genuine this time rather than calculated. "I can see why Lucas chose you. You've got spine." She tapped the proposal with one manicured finger. "I'll agree to this, but with one modification. The restructured portion goes to 4 years instead of 3, and you add a half point to the interest rate. That gives you better cash flow while still meeting the bank's requirements." Evelyn blinked, surprised. The modification actually improved their position, made the payments more manageable. "Why would you offer better terms than I proposed?" "Because you're right. This is better business than revenge. And because, despite what you might think, I'm not actually interested in destroying people. I wanted Lucas to see what he was giving up by choosing you, but you just proved you're not the desperate widow I thought you were. You're a partner worthy of him." She extended her hand across the desk. "Do we have a deal?" Evelyn shook it, feeling the shift in dynamics, the grudging respect that had replaced hostility. "We have a deal." "Good. I'll have the papers drawn up by end of week. And Mrs. Hart, I hope you'll accept this as an apology of sorts. I behaved badly, let jealousy cloud my judgment. That's not who I want to be." Apology accepted. And for what it's worth, I understand the impulse. Love makes us all a little crazy sometimes. Marjorie's smile turned wry. "It certainly does. Though in my case, I'm not sure it was ever really love. More like stubborn determination to have what I thought I wanted. Lucas deserves better than that. He deserves what you two have." Evelyn left the bank in a daze, the signed agreement clutched in her hand like a lifeline. She'd gone in expecting battle, and found instead an unexpected ally, proof that people could surprise you if you gave them the chance. The ranch was saved, the loans were manageable, the future was secure. She went straight to the ranch, found Lucas in the barn working on tack repairs. He looked up as she entered, read something in her expression, and set down his tools. "What happened?" Marjorie agreed. "Better terms than I proposed, actually. The ranch is safe, Lucas. We did it." His knees seemed to give out. He sat down hard on a hay bale, his scarred hands coming up to cover his face. For a moment, Evelyn thought he was crying, but when he lowered his hands, she saw relief so profound it transformed his entire expression. How? What did you say to her? Evelyn sat beside him, detailed the conversation, the proposal, the unexpected resolution. Lucas listened in silence, his hand finding hers and holding tight. You saved everything, he said when she finished. The ranch, the men's jobs, our future, all of it. We saved it, together. She rested her head on his shoulder. Though I'll admit the part where Marjorie actually turned out to have a conscience was unexpected. People are complicated, even the difficult ones. He kissed the top of her head gently. Thank you. For fighting for us, for this place, for everything we're building. I know what that money meant to you. It means more now, invested in our future instead of buried in the past. Thomas's debts will go unpaid. And honestly, I'm okay with that. His creditors can wait, or they can forget about it entirely. I'm done carrying his mistakes. Are you sure? You wanted closure. I have closure. It just looks different than I planned. She straightened, looked at him directly. Thomas took my security, my dignity, my trust in people. Paying his debts was supposed to reclaim all that, prove I was better than his failures. But you know what actually reclaimed those things? You did. This place did. Building something real instead of trying to fix something broken. That's closure. That's freedom. Lucas pulled her close, and they sat together in the quiet barn, surrounded by the smell of hay and leather and horses, while outside the late winter sun painted everything in shades of gold. They'd weathered the storm. They'd fought for what mattered and won. Not perfectly, not without sacrifice, but genuinely and together. The weeks that followed were lighter, easier. With the financial crisis resolved and their future secured, Lucas and Evelyn could focus on planning their wedding and their life beyond it. They decided on a simple ceremony at the ranch in early April, when the first spring flowers would be blooming and the worst of winter would be behind them. Evelyn designed a dress herself, worked on it in spare moments between her kitchen duties. Nothing fancy, she wasn't that kind of woman, but something that made her feel beautiful and appropriate for the occasion. Lucas commissioned a local craftsman to build them a new bed frame, larger than the one in either of their current rooms, a statement of permanence and partnership. Ethan appointed himself the unofficial wedding planner, asking questions about flowers and food, and whether there would be music. His enthusiasm was infectious, pulling smiles from even the most taciturn ranch hands. The boy had found his place here, had grown from a frightened child into someone with confidence and purpose. He worked hard, learned eagerly, and had started calling Lucas Sir, with genuine respect rather than fear. Think he'll stay? Evelyn asked Lucas one evening as they watched Ethan practice his rope work with Samuel. Long term, I mean. Make a life here? If he wants to, there's always a place for him. Lucas's voice held warmth and something like paternal pride. He's good with the horses, learning fast. Could be foreman material in a few years if he keeps at it. You're good with him, patient, encouraging. You'd make a wonderful father. He glanced at her, something vulnerable in his expression. Is that something you want? Children? Evelyn considered the question seriously. I don't know, maybe. I'm 34, not exactly in my prime for childbearing, but if it happened, I think I'd be happy about it. Would you? Terrified, probably, but happy too. He slipped his arm around her waist. We don't have to decide now. Let's get married first, settle into being partners, see what life brings. Sounds perfect. April arrived with sunshine and new grass and a sense of renewal that permeated everything. The ranch hands spent a week preparing for the wedding, constructing an arbor near the house, arranging seating, making everything as special as their limited resources would allow. Evelyn cooked for days in advance, preparing a feast that would feed not just the ranch, but the neighbors who'd been invited, the few townspeople who'd proven themselves friends rather than gossips. Harold Atwood from the general store came, bringing his wife and a generous gift of fine china. Several other business owners attended, people who'd watched Evelyn face down Marjorie and decided she was worth knowing. To everyone's surprise, Marjorie herself appeared, dressed beautifully but without ostentation, and handed Lucas an envelope. Wedding gift, she said simply. Paid receipt for the restructured loans, every penny, cleared in full. Lucas stared at the document, speechless. Evelyn found her voice first. Marjorie, this is too much. We can't accept. You can and you will. Consider it my investment in better business relationships and clearer consciences. Besides, the bank's doing well, and I've been promoted to regional director. I can afford the generosity. She smiled, more genuine than Evelyn had ever seen. Be happy, both of you. You've earned it. She left before they could respond, disappearing into the small crowd with the grace of someone who knew when to make an exit. The ceremony itself was simple and profound. A local minister spoke briefly about partnership and second chances, about building lives on foundations of respect and trust. Lucas and Evelyn exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promising honesty and support, choosing each other not out of need, but out of genuine love and regard. When the minister pronounced them married, Lucas kissed her with a tenderness that made her throat tight and her eyes sting with happy tears. The assembled crowd cheered, the ranch hands whistling and stomping their approval. Ethan grinned so wide his face seemed likely to split. The celebration that followed was warm and raucous, filled with good food and better company. Evelyn danced with Samuel, with Harold Atwood, with a dozen ranch hands who insisted on taking their turns with the bride. Lucas stood to the side watching, his scarred face soft with contentment, until she pulled him into the dancing despite his protests about having 2 left feet. You saved me, she told him as they swayed together, their movements awkward but sincere. The day you gave me work when I had nothing, the day you chose to see my potential instead of my desperation. You saved yourself, Lucas corrected gently. I just gave you a place to land while you did it, and then you turned around and saved me right back, pulled me out of the grief and guilt I'd been drowning in for 5 years. We're even. No. Evelyn smiled up at him. We're partners. That's better than even. The sun set on their wedding day in a blaze of orange and pink, painting the ranch in colors so beautiful they seemed almost impossible. As the last guest departed and the ranch hands retired to the bunkhouse, Lucas and Evelyn stood together looking out over the land that was now truly theirs, shared and secured by mutual effort and sacrifice. What do you think? Lucas asked. Any regrets? Evelyn thought about the journey that had brought her here, the devastating loss of everything she'd built with Thomas, the desperate walk down dusty roads with 3 pennies and a skillet, the moment she'd stood on Lucas's doorstep offering the only thing she had left, her ability to cook and her refusal to quit. The months of proving herself, of building trust and respect, of falling in love so gradually she'd barely noticed until it was complete, the fire that had tested them both, the financial crisis they'd overcome together. All of it leading to this moment, standing beside a good man on land they'd fought to protect, surrounded by people who'd become family. No regrets, she said firmly. Not a single one. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Good, because I'm planning on keeping you for the next 50 years or so. Only 50? I was hoping for longer. He laughed, pulled her close. However long we get then. Every day we're given. They stood there as darkness settled over Stonefield Ranch, 2 people who'd been broken by life and rebuilt stronger in the aftermath. 2 people who'd chosen courage over comfort, truth over convenience, partnership over protection. 2 people who'd learned that second chances weren't given. They were built, day by day, choice by choice, until something new and strong rose from the ashes of what had burned away. In the spring, Evelyn planted a garden where the burned storage room had stood. She chose flowers that would bloom in succession from April through October, ensuring there would always be color and life in that spot. It became her favorite place on the ranch, a living reminder that destruction wasn't the end of the story, that from ruins, with enough patience and care and stubborn determination, beautiful things could grow. Lucas would sometimes find her there in the early mornings, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint the sky. He'd sit beside her in companionable silence, their shoulders touching, their hands clasped. They rarely spoke during these moments. They didn't need to. Everything important had already been said, proven, built into the foundation of their life together. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Evelyn's efficiency with supplies and her ability to maintain morale through excellent cooking freed Lucas to focus on expansion and improvement. They added a second bunkhouse, upgraded equipment, invested in better breeding stock, Within 2 years, Stonefield Ranch was the most successful operation in the territory, known not just for quality cattle, but for fair treatment of workers and ethical business practices. Ethan grew into a fine young man, eventually becoming foreman when Samuel retired. Other troubled souls found their way to the ranch over the years, drawn by its reputation as a place where second chances were real and hard work was rewarded. Evelyn fed them all. Her kitchen, the heart of an ever-expanding family, bound not by blood, but by choice and mutual respect. Sometimes when Evelyn was cooking and the house was full of good smells and the sound of men's voices raised in laughter, she'd pause and think about the woman she'd been that day on the road. Broken, desperate, certain she'd reached the end. That woman would hardly recognize her now, confident, secure, loved, and loving in return. The transformation still amazed her when she let herself consider it. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas would ask when he caught her in these reflective moments. "How far I've traveled to get here. How grateful I am that I didn't give up on that road." "I'm grateful you didn't either. Can't imagine this place, this life, without you." And that, Evelyn thought, was the real miracle. Not that she'd survived her lowest point, though that was remarkable enough. Not even that she'd found work and security and a way forward. The miracle was that she'd found belonging, purpose, love that didn't demand she be anything other than herself, scarred hands, stubborn pride, iron skillet, and all. She'd arrived at Stonefield Ranch with nothing. She'd leave it eventually, decades from now, she hoped, having built an empire of a different kind. Not measured in acres or cattle, but in lives touched, meals shared, love given and received without condition or reservation. The woman who'd spoken through frozen tears, offering her skills with desperate dignity, had been right about one thing. She could cook. She could do that and so much more. She could survive, rebuild, love again, create home and family from raw materials and sheer determination. She could, and she had. And the life she'd built from those ashes burned brighter than anything that had come before. That was worth more than any fortune, more precious than any treasure. It was worth everything. And every morning when she woke beside Lucas, when she tied on her apron and began preparing breakfast for her family, when she looked out at the garden growing where destruction had once reigned, Evelyn Hart-Hale gave thanks for the journey that had brought her home. Not the home she'd lost, but the one she'd built. Not the life she'd planned, but the one she'd chosen. Not rescue, but partnership. Not charity, but earned respect and genuine love. She'd walked through fire, literal and metaphorical. She'd faced down gossip and malice and her own deepest fears. She'd bet everything on her ability to cook and her refusal to quit, and she'd won more than she'd ever imagined possible. And if anyone ever asked her how she'd done it, how she'd come back from rock bottom to build something beautiful, she'd tell them the truth. She'd offered what she had, worked harder than seemed possible, loved fiercely when love found her, and refused to let other people's judgments define her worth. She'd simply refused to give up. And that, in the end, made all the difference. The sun rose on another day at Stonefield Ranch, painting everything in shades of gold and promise. Evelyn stood in her kitchen, her scarred hand steady and sure as she began the day's work. Through the window, she could see Lucas heading toward the barn, could hear Ethan calling out a greeting to the morning crew, could smell the earth warming under the spring sunshine. This was her life now, her home, her family, her future. And it was more than enough. It was everything.